Om Ajnanatimirandasya Gnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So here we are reading about Lord Brahma, how he started populating this universe. So one may wonder that Bhagavatam is considered to be the fruit, ripened fruit of all Vedic literature. And in the very second verse of Srimad Bhagavatam, it says, Dharmaha projita kaitva atra parmo nirmatsaranam satam. This Vedic literature, Bhagavatam, is specifically meant for non-envious Paramahamsas. Then, why does Bhagavatam talk about all this subject matter? What it has got to do? Why we should be reading Brahma populated this universe, created Dakshas and Kumaras. From his body he created one male, one female body. Here it is described, one with moustache and another with swollen breast. There is man and woman. And we will see further they are none other but Manu and his wife. So that comes further. Prabhupada explains. Swayambhuva Manu and Shatarupa, who became the queen of great soul Manu. Isn't it? So why not what Krishna is saying in Bhagavad Gita, Sarva Dharman Paritajya Mamekam Sharanam Vraja? Why do we have to understand all these subordinate subject matters at all? Why don't we simply surrender to the Lord? Practice devotional service, isn't it? Similarly, we find in Bhagavad Gita also that the essence is described. Finally, it is devotional service to the Lord. The most confidential knowledge is described. What is the most confidential knowledge? Manmana bhava madbhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru. So similarly, we may wonder why in Bhagavad Gita bhakti is the essence, then why karma is described? Why jnana is described? Why Ashtanga Yoga is described? So what do you say? Bhagavatam is the ripened fruit of all Vedic literature, and it contains narrations about the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Why do we have to go through this, Brahma's sex life, Brahma's all those things? He gave up one body. In that body he had no affection. In the new body he had no affection for, sex life. That body he gave up. Then he took up another body. Why do we have to read all these things? Anyone? Garuda Tuja? Today, in the conversations, there was a very beautiful Prabhupada is describing something very important about Bhagavatam. First, Prabhupada describes about the intelligence in human form of life. So, Prabhupada is, they're having a walk on that seashore. So, in the seashore, we know that there are many kinds of, different kinds of crabs and all other different insects are there. So, one devotee is asking this question. Now, Prabhupada is first pointing out, see how they are able to see their food. Even though in that sand it is very difficult to make out, is it sand or is it for us, for a common man, whether it is sand or something else, it is very difficult to make out. So Prabhupada points out, see how intelligent they are able to make out the difference between their food and the sand. Even though they are small creatures, tiny creatures, but they are able to make out. That distinction is there. So, Prabhupada points out that intelligence, if we misutilize in human form of life, not to understand the subject matter of God, then it is kripana, miserly intelligence. That intelligence is available in that small creature also. He is more intelligent than us in matters of eating, sleeping. Isn't it? So, Srimad Bhagavatam points out Jivasya Tattva Jignasa. One has to inquire about Tattva Jignasa, absolute truth. That should be the goal of human form of life. And the very first of Srimad Bhagavatam gives the definition of God. Right? What is it? What does it say? Janmadi asya yatah anvayat itarataschaartheshva abhigna swarat. So, Prabhupada points out, absolute truth is that from which everything emanates, in which everything rests, maintained by that Supreme Lord. And finally, when everything is dissolved, enters in Him. Janam Adi, not just creation, beginning with creation, maintenance, destruction, everything is factually caused by that Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then what does Prabhupada further say? How this verse is very, very, beautifully it explains that aphorism of Vedanta Sutra, which one may misinterpret. Vedanta Sutra also begins, it also says Janmadiyasya yataha, but it doesn't describe fully. But Prabhupada explains how this Bhagavatam first verse completely describes that absolute truth. So further, what does Prabhupada point out? So first thing is, from whom everything emanates, in whom everything rests, who is the maintainer of everything, and finally when everything is dissolved, it rests in the Supreme Lord. That is the definition of absolute truth. Then Prabhupada says, somebody may say, okay, fine, that is absolute truth. We are also saying, there is something absolute, everything is happening, isn't it? But then they will point out, it is not something living. Even this body we are living now, it is only an illusion. Life is temporary, it's a manifestation, this consciousness is a temporary manifestation of matter. Matter combines together, it gives rise to something called consciousness, which is temporarily manifested in matter. Generally, there is no manifestation of consciousness in matter, but certain combination brings about this consciousness. So they will say, we are also pointing out the same thing. Factually, everything is impersonal. It is inanimate. There is nothing called living. So Prabhupada says, therefore Bhagavatam points out, no. That absolute truth which is the cause of all this creation, maintenance, annihilation, he is abhigna. He is consciousness. And he is not ordinary consciousness. Swarat. He is that supreme consciousness. Supremely independent. We are also consciousness. We are all dependent. He is Swarat. You see? So all these things Bhagavatam points out very nicely. Then Prabhupada points out that this material manifestation to which even the great philosophers, great scientists are so much attached is nothing but an illusion. It is a shadow of that spiritual reality. It is a shadow of spiritual creation. Muhyanti yat surayaha. By the energy of the Supreme Lord, even great personalities like Brahma are put into illusion. Muhyanti yat surayaha. Great people. What to talk about these scientists? They are all studying this matter, all these things. What is this matter factually? It is nothing but reflection of the spiritual reality. Reality is somewhere else. They are studying reality in the material world, which is nothing but shadow of the reality. So these great personalities, they are all studying this shadow, very attached to this shadow. And who is the origin of this shadow? Origin is also Krishna only. Origin of the spiritual world, origin of the material world, everything is Krishna. So Prabhupada is pointing out all these things, that Bhagavatam is such a great literature, it will give you the complete knowledge. You see, knowledge means not just knowledge. It should also contain what is not knowledge, so that we are not mistaken. Real knowledge means knowledge separate from ignorance. That also must be known. And the cause of ignorance, where it came from, that also must be known. So that is what is Bhagavatam. See? So, to fulfill the illusory desires of the living entity who want to enjoy in this material world, the Lord creates this shadow material world. So that is also created, the shadow material world is also created from the Lord. So all that subject matter is discussed in Srimad Bhagavatam. And Bhagavatam is saying, Prabhupada points out, not that after reading Bhagavatam after millions of years you will get perfection. Sadhyo hridya vrudhyate kritubhi shushrubhi tat shana. For those who are sincere, shushrubhi, who hear properly, immediately tat shana, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is immediately he becomes situated in the heart of such a sincere devotee. So Bhagavatam is not some ordinary literature. If Shukdev Goswami is describing all these incidents of Brahma falling down or running behind his daughter, contemplating, all this subject matter is not some ordinary subject matter. This is Amala Puran. That is what we should understand. If such a great personality like Shukdev Goswami, who is only glorifying the Supreme Personality of Godhead, if he has to speak about creation of Brahma, how Brahma created, how Brahma populated, then it cannot be an ordinary subject matter. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has described Bhagavatam as the topmost Amala Puran, essence of all the Vedic literature. Paramahamsa Samhita, isn't it? So we should not simply think that these are all not meant for devotees, why we have to read through all these things. So in today's class we will try to understand how systematically Bhagavatam elevates the consciousness of living entity from material to spiritual, from independence to dependence on the Supreme Lord. It gradually progresses from one subject matter to another, gradually elevating our consciousness to be completely dependent on that Supreme Personality of Godhead. How that transformation is brought about is the subject matter in Bhagavatam, if we read properly. You see? So, Bhagavatam, in second canto, Shukdev Goswami explains, it contains 10 subject matter. This 10 subject matter is gradually from one canto to another, these subject matters are developed. Beginning from our gross consciousness. Our gross consciousness is now completely absorbed in matter. We cannot understand Krishna's supreme spiritual pastimes. We will misunderstand them to be mundane. The moment gopis and Krishna activities with gopis are described, our heart will be filled with lusty desires. Isn't it? So, in order to make us to come to that level, to elevate us to the level of Paramahamsa, where we can actually start appreciating Krishna's pastime. Otherwise, why Shukdev Goswami will describe? Shukdev Goswami is describing Krishna's dancing with the gopis. They're all spiritual pastimes, topmost pastimes. You see? Bilva Mangala Thakur has described those intimate pastimes of the Lord, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is relishing those pastimes. But in order to relish those spiritual pastimes of the Lord, first our mundane consciousness has to be elevated. Where is our consciousness now? It is not absorbed in spiritual life, it is absorbed in matter. So first we have to understand this matter is connected to the Lord. This creation is connected to the Lord. It is not separate from the Lord. First we have to start seeing this connection of everything we see in this world. Energies of Krishna, first we have to recognize how they are connected to the Lord. Then we will be able to appreciate that Shaktiman when we see his Shakti manifested in his creation. You see? So that's why right in the beginning, it is very amazing to understand. When Parikshit Maharaj is asking, I want to hear Krishna Katha, you see, Parikshit Maharaj is directly asking, I want to hear Krishna Katha for these 7 days. See? Shukdev Goswami is not taking a shortcut. He is not thinking, let me describe only that intimate pastimes of Krishna. He wants to hear only Krishna Katha. Shukdev Goswami begins with creation. Isn't it very surprising? He is beginning with creation. Why? That is how Shukdev Goswami has scientifically developed this subject matter of Srimad Bhagavatam. From creation, which is called Ashrita. All other subject matters. There are 10 subject matter. 9 subject matters are called Ashrita, dependent subject matter. 10th subject matter is called Ashraya, on whom they are all dependent, the Sammam Bonam. That is described later on. So, relationship, because Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has also explained. What is bhakti actually? Bhakti begins with sambandha. What is our relationship with the Lord? What is material world's relationship with the Lord? That is called sambandha. So first we have to understand sambandha jnana. Then there is question of understanding prayojana. We are not in the spiritual world, we are in the material world. So first we have to start understanding sambandha of everything with that spiritual Lord, with that absolute truth. Then on that platform we have to start acting. That is called abhideya jnana. And then when we act on that platform and we achieve complete purification, then we obtain prayojana. the ultimate love of Godhead, then we can relish Krishna's intimate pastime. Otherwise it is not possible. So, we will see how systematically Bhagavatam describes these 10 subject matter very beautifully. So, this is given by Shukdev Goswami himself in the second canto, that what are the subject matter we are going to discuss in these 7 days. So, he says, it will begin with Sarga. It will begin with primary creation, the original creation by the Supreme Lord himself. Primary creation is called Sarga. Under this, what all is created, if all of you remember? All the ingredients required. The philosopher, the Sankhya philosopher, they study, right? 24 elements. All those 24 elements are created by the Supreme Lord in his form as Mahavishnu. By his glance, the Lord creates this Mahatattva. Mahatattva becomes manifested later on into this gradually, one by one. Beginning from false ego, ahankara, all these things, then mind, all those things, then gross subject matter. From subtle to gross manifestation becomes. Just like from small seed, gross tree becomes manifested. From subtle, just the glance of the Lord, from that subtle glance of the Lord, all these ingredients required for Brahma to further create are all manifested by Mahavishnu. That is called Sarga. Sarga, even though all these 10 subject matters are discussed practically in all cantos, they are all dispersed also, they are all discussed in many cantos. But still, specifically, Sarga is discussed in 3rd canto. In the 3rd canto, creation by Mahavishnu is primarily discussed. Even though Visarga is also discussed to a certain extent. But main subject matter of 3rd canto is Sarga. In the 4th canto, which we will be reading further, the description is more about Visarga. Visarga means the secondary creation of Brahma. What is the secondary creation? Creating the different bodies of the living entities. That is his secondary creation. So, Sarga, Visarga. Visarga is discussed in 4th canto. Next is 3rd? No, that comes later. First, now only, see now very beautifully, that is what we are discussing. Now what Brahma is doing is, he is creating, he is populating. So he is creating the bodies of the different living entities, right? Then is called Sthanam. Sthanam means where after creation they will be placed. Somebody will be placed in Swargaloka, somebody will be placed in Narakaloka, somebody on Bhuloka, somebody on Bhuvarloka. Isn't it? So where exactly according to their karma the living entities have to be placed, that is called Sthanam. So Sthanam means the maintenance of the universe by the personality of Godhead. So different places of their residence is created and they are maintained by the Lord. That is called Sthanam. So under Sthanam is what generally people talk about. Lord Vishnu is maintainer, Brahma is creator. So Visarga they call as creator. It is not Sarga. Nirodha, finally when everything is destroyed, that is Lord Shiva's work. Correct? So, Sthanam is that maintenance by the Lord as Paramatma in this universe. Next. No. Before that, Poshana. Now the Lord has created different places and the Lord is maintaining. Prabhupada says, just like the king maintains his subject, but still he maintains his family member See? He pays special attention to the members of his family. Right? They have a separate palace. They have a separate supply of whatever. Even though king is maintaining all the subject, he also maintains specially his family members. Similarly, even though the Lord is the maintainer of everyone, there is a special maintenance for his, special protection, Prabhupada says, for his devotees. So sthana is described in 5th canto. So what is 3rd canto? Sarga. 4th canto? Visarga. 5th canto is sthanam. That is what is described. Then 6th canto describes about Poshana. So we can see the example of how the Lord gives special protection to his devotees. Anyone remembers one incident in Bhagavatam? In 6th canto, where one devotee fell apart from his devotional life, but the Lord protected him. Ajamil, right? So we can see the specific pastime of Ajamila is mentioned in 6th canto, where Poshanam is described. Next is 5th subject matter is Uti. That is, what does it mean? Urge for creation. Once the living entities are placed, they being part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, they all have urge. They want to also create something. They want to do activities in this world. Isn't it? So urge to do activities, urge to create, all that is the part of Uti. So Prabhupada says, the urge of creation or initiative power, that is the cause of all inventions according to necessities of time, space and objects. So in 7th canto we find a very innovative, Hiranyakashipu, Hiranyaksha, all of them, earlier scientists, they are described, isn't it? He wanted to create, just like Ravana also we find, isn't it? They wanted to create a staircase up to Swargaloka. Why we have to go there? By tapasya, all those things. Innovation we will do. Isn't it? Like that. So that is called Uti. That is described in 7th canto. Then, next 6th subject matter is Manvantara. That is what we are reading now. Isn't it? Brahma created Manu and his wife, and both of them then together created. We are all considered to be descendants of Manu. That's why it's called mankind. So the first thing, this is actually very, very interesting, that even in Bible, it comes with different name. Adam and Eve were created, something like that, from where they have picked up the name. But actually we can see mankind, even that word in English or the word in Hindi, Manushya, they all come from Manu. So origin is Manu of mankind. So all these generations were populated later on by Manu. In Brahma's life, this was first Manu. In his one day, 14 Manus are created. Just imagine, in his one day of Brahma, 14 Manus are created. And what we'll be reading now will be the first Manu. So that is described in 8th canto of Bhagavatam. 7th canto talks more about Uti. 8th canto talks about Manvantara. Then Ishanu Katha, all the different incarnations of the Lord, all those things are described in 9th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Scriptural information regarding the personality of Godhead, His incarnation on earth, activities of His devotees, dealing with these subject matters are essential for progressive human life, Prabhupada says. They are described in 9th canto. Then, even though in 10th canto, actually Ashraya Tattva is described. In 11th canto, Mukti is described. See? Mukti, or what is the meaning of real liberation from this world. So there mukti is described. Prabhupada of course explains, real mukti is swarupena vyavasthiti. Even though being in the material world, when we are able to serve the Lord, that is called as real mukti. Person is liberated even while living in this gross body or even in this material world. That is called mukti. 12th canto, Nirodha, destruction, winding off the energies of the Lord, devastation, all those things are pralaya. That is described in 12th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. And 10th canto talks about Ashraya Tattva, the Samambonam. And that Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Ashraya Tattva, is the shelter of all other tattvas. So actually what we are seeing now here is this Manvantara, or we are seeing Sthanam, how Brahmaji placed all the living entities in different universes, how he populated. So all of them are Ashrita Tattva, very much related to the Ashraya Tattva. So gradually we have to become elevated from one subject matter to another. And Srimad Bhagavatam is very scientifically developing these subject matters from one to another. So we'll stop with this. Granthra Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.